The hull breach in Section 9 screamed like a dying animal as atmosphere vented into the void. Rensa pressed her four-fingered hand against the emergency seal panel and watched the pressure readings drop into critical territory. Another hit like that, and the research station would tear itself apart. She had accepted death 20 minutes ago when the Raider fleet emerged from slipstream space. 8 warships against a science outpost with shields designed to deflect micrometeorites, not military-grade plasma cannons. The mathematics of survival were simple and absolute. Research Station Helix 7 would cease to exist within the hour. "Commander, shield generators at 14%, her tactical officer Bren called out. His scales had turned the pale gray color that marked terminal fear in his species. "I've rerouted everything I can, but the capacitors are melting." Rensa moved through the command center with deliberate calm. Panic served no purpose now. Her crew of 43 scientists and technicians deserved better than watching their leader fall apart in the final moments. She had sent the distress beacon, knowing full well that help was 3 days away at best. The nearest patrol ships were investigating a colony dispute on the far side of the sector. The station shuddered again as another volley hammered their failing shields. Rensa grabbed a support rail and felt the metal vibrate under her grip. The raiders were Kroll mercenaries, brutal and thorough. They left no witnesses and took no prisoners. Their reputation across 12 systems was written in the ash of burned stations and silent colonies. "All personnel to core sections," Rensa ordered, her voice carrying across the intercom with artificial steadiness. "Seal emergency bulkheads and prepare for hull failure. This is not a drill." She watched her crew move with practiced efficiency even as their world came apart around them. Dr. Feln gathered his geological samples with shaking hands, determined that his life's work would survive even if he did not. Young Vril helped the elder researchers toward the reinforced shelters, her face set in grim determination. They all knew the shelters would buy them minutes at most, perhaps an hour if they were unlucky enough to suffocate slowly instead of dying in the initial breach. The command center emptied until only Rensa and Bren remained at their posts. The Kroll warships circled like predators, taking their time, savoring the kill. Their commander had hailed the station once to demand surrender, then laughed when Rensa explained they had nothing worth stealing except scientific data. He promised to make their deaths educational. "Shield failure in 90 seconds, Bren reported, his voice barely a whisper. "Commander, I'm sorry I couldn't do more." Rensa reached across and gripped his shoulder, a gesture of comfort her species reserved for family. "You did everything possible. We all did. Sometimes the universe simply decides our time is finished." The tactical display showed the Raider formation tightening, preparing for the final bombardment that would crack the station open like an egg. Rensa thought of her family on the Aelith homeworld, tried to remember the smell of the gardens where she played as a child, found the memory slipping away under the weight of present terror. Then every sensor on the command center exploded with warning signals. "What is that?" Bren shouted, his claws scraping across the console as he tried to make sense of the readings. "Massive energy signature bearing 270, distance unknown. It's like nothing in the database." Space itself seemed to tear open between the station and the raiders, reality rippling like water as something enormous forced its way through dimensions that should not permit passage. Rensa stared at the visual feed and felt her 3 hearts skip in synchronized shock. The warship that materialized was a monster of angular armor and brutal functionality. Scarred hull plating spoke of countless battles. Weapon batteries bristled along its flanks like the spines of some deep space predator. It moved with impossible grace for something so massive, sliding into position between the station and the Kroll fleet with contemptuous ease. "Reading Terran transponder codes," Bren said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "It's human, Commander, it's a human warship." Rensa had never seen a Terran Navy vessel in person. Humanity was still relatively new to the galactic community. Their military kept to the frontier regions, protecting their own colonies and rarely interfering in broader conflicts. She knew them by reputation only, Stories of fierce warriors who fought with disturbing intensity, rumors of rescue operations conducted at suicidal odds. The communication system crackled to life with a voice roughened by years of command. Accent, thick with Earth's cultural variations. Research Station Helix 7, this is Captain Davis of the Terran Navy dreadnought Relentless. Hold tight, we've got you. The Kroll commander responded immediately, his translator rendering his threats in cold, clinical tones. Human vessel, withdraw immediately. This is Kroll territory. Your interference violates 12 treaties. There was a pause. Renser imagined she could hear the human captain's smile in the silence. When Davis spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Make me. The human warship powered up weapons that made the Kroll arsenal look like children's toys. Targeting systems locked onto all 8 raider vessels simultaneously. The dreadnought's engines burned with fusion fire that painted the void in shades of blue and white. Rensa felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time since the raiders arrived, fragile and terrifying in its intensity. The battle for Research Station Helix 7 was about to begin, and the humans had just declared themselves on the side of the desperate and dying. The first Kroll volley struck the human dreadnought with enough force to vaporize a small moon. Plasma cannons that had been melting through the station's shields hit the Relentless across its forward armor in a brilliant cascade of destructive energy. Rensa watched the tactical display and waited for the human ship to break apart under the assault. The dreadnought absorbed the hit without even slowing down. Their armor is still intact, Bren said, his voice climbing toward hysteria. 47 direct hits and their hull integrity hasn't dropped below 98%. How is that possible? The Kroll poured fire into the human vessel with increasing desperation. 8 warships concentrating their full arsenal on a single target. The void lit up like a newborn star as energy weapons and kinetic rounds hammered against the Relentless. Rensa had studied enough military history to know this should be working. Overwhelming firepower against isolated targets was basic tactical doctrine. The human ship should be dying. Instead, it just kept coming. Terran vessel is not returning fire, Bren reported, confusion replacing fear in his expression. They're taking hits, but their weapons are still cold. What are they waiting for? Inside the Relentless, Captain Davis watched his tactical display with the patience of a predator who had already. His ship shuddered with each impact, but the damage reports remained minimal. Ablative armor doing exactly what it was designed to do, buying time and gathering intelligence. Lieutenant Harris, Davis said calmly, what do we know? His tactical officer worked her console with practiced efficiency, eyes tracking 8 separate threat assessments simultaneously. Kroll standard configuration warships, plasma-focused armament, predictable firing patterns. They're burning through their capacitor reserves fast. Estimate 40% ammunition expended in first volley. And they're targeting. Sloppy, Harris allowed herself a small smile. Concentrating on center mass, no attempt to find weak points, they're panicking. Davis nodded slowly. The Kroll had revealed everything he needed to know in those first desperate minutes. Their weapons placement, their tactical coordination, the slight delay in their command structure that meant orders took precious seconds to propagate through the fleet. All the little details that separated professional military forces from pirates with delusions of adequacy. Weapons free, Davis ordered. Precision strikes, disable but don't destroy unless they give us no choice. Remember, we're here to save lives, not take them. The Relentless fired once. A single railgun volley, 6 tungsten penetrators moving at relativistic speeds, each round calculated to a precision measured in micrometers. The station crew watched 3 Kroll warships explode simultaneously as the rounds punched through their reactor shielding. Secondary explosions tore the raiders apart from inside, brief flowers of light that faded into expanding debris fields. The remaining 5 Kroll vessels tried to scatter, their formation breaking apart as survival instinct overrode tactical discipline. The human dreadnought moved like it was reading their minds, positioning itself to cut off escape vectors before the raiders even committed to their course changes. "Launch fighters," Davis ordered, his voice still carrying that same calm certainty. "I want those ships disabled, not destroyed. Let's give them a chance to make better choices." Hangar bays opened along the relentless flanks and small craft erupted into space like angry wasps. 20 fighters, each one moving with inhuman precision. Rensa realized with shock that the pilots must be using neural interfaces, the kind of direct brain to ship connection that most species considered too dangerous for combat operations. The human pilots thought differently. Lieutenant Riley led her squadron in a sweeping attack run that would have been impossible for conventional controls. Her fighter twisted through point defense fire like it was dancing, weapons hot and targeting systems locked onto the fleeing Kroll ships. She keyed her comm and spoke with the easy confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. "Tango leader to all units, targeting engines only. These folks are having a bad day already. Let's not make it worse than it needs to be." Her wingman, a pilot named Costa, laughed over the open channel. "Copy that lead, surgical strikes, making it look easy." The fighters swarmed over the Kroll vessels like they were standing still. Precision beam weapons carved through engine assemblies, left the raiders drifting in space with their weapons still functional, but no way to maneuver. One Kroll captain tried to swing his guns around to take a fighter with him. Riley put 3 rounds through his fire control systems before he could complete the turn. "That's a negative Ghost Rider," she said cheerfully. "The pattern is full." In 4 minutes of combat, the engagement was over. 3 Kroll warships destroyed, 5 disabled and drifting, 0 human casualties. The Relentless hadn't even deployed its full weapons capacity. Davis had ended the fight using maybe 10% of his available firepower. The station crew stood in stunned silence as the human dreadnought moved into a protective position, its bulk now serving as a shield between them and the crippled raiders. Captain Davis's voice came over the comm again, still calm, still measured, like he had just finished a routine training exercise instead of dismantling an entire battle fleet. "Station Helix 7, threats neutralized. We'll be sending over repair teams shortly. In the meantime, sit tight and try not to touch anything that's sparking. Those hull breaches look nasty." Rensa found her voice after a moment, professionalism overriding shock. "Captain Davis, we thank you. You saved our lives." "Just doing our job, Commander," Davis replied, and Rensa could hear the smile in his voice. "That's what we're out here for. Now let's get your station patched up before something else decides to fall apart." Bren looked at his commander with wide eyes, scales slowly shifting back. Toward their normal color, "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." Rensa nodded slowly, watching the human warship on her screens, scarred and deadly and impossibly brave. "Yes," she said, "they came." The docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang that echoed through the damaged airlock. Rensa stood with 5 of her senior staff and tried not to think about the fact that they were about to meet the warriors who had just dismantled 8 warships like they were training targets. Her hands trembled slightly, a physiological response she could not suppress no matter how much she willed herself to stay calm. The airlock cycled open, and the human Marines came through in 2 neat columns, armor that was clearly designed for boarding actions, weapons held in a ready position that somehow managed to appear both casual and absolutely lethal. They moved with the kind of synchronized precision that only came from years of training together, each one covering angles and watching for threats that didn't exist on a friendly science station. The Marine in the lead stopped 3 meters from Rensa and tilted her helmet back, revealing a weathered face with sharp eyes and a scar that ran from her left temple down to her jaw. She looked like she had seen every kind of hell the galaxy could offer and walked away from all of it. "Commander Rensa," the Marine said, her accent clipping the words in a way that suggested she came from one of Earth's northern regions. "I'm Sergeant Brooks. We're here to help with damage assessment and immediate repairs. Is your crew accounted for?" Rensa managed a nod. All 43 personnel present. We have 17 injuries, none critical. Our medical bay is overwhelmed but functional. Brooks gestured to one of her team, a young woman with a medical pack strapped to her armor. Hayes, get down there and see what they need. Take Wilson with you. Help where you can, but don't get in their way. The medic moved immediately, already pulling equipment from her pack as she headed toward the medical section. Rensa noticed the human didn't ask for directions. Someone had already uploaded the station's layout to their combat systems. The Marines knew where everything was before they even came aboard. Sergeant, Rensa began, trying to find words adequate for what she needed to express. Your ship, your captain, you saved us when no one else could have arrived in time. I don't know how to properly thank you. Brooks smiled, and it transformed her hard face into something almost gentle. No thanks necessary, Commander. Your distress beacon was broadcasting. We were in range. That's pretty much the whole story. She paused, looked around at the damaged corridor, the blast scoring, and the hastily patched hull breaches. Looks like you folks had a rough go of it. Let's focus on getting this station back in working order. Another Marine, a massive man with arms like tree trunks, started unpacking repair equipment from storage containers. He introduced himself as Corporal Jackson and spoke with an easy friendliness that seemed completely at odds with the weapons he carried. We brought hull sealant, emergency power cells, medical supplies, some food that doesn't taste like recycled protein paste, the good stuff from our own supplies. You're giving us your personal rations? Bren asked, his scales rippling with confusion. Why would you do that? Jackson shrugged like the question was absurd. Because you folks have been eating station food for months and you just survived a near-death experience. Seemed like you could use something decent. Besides, we got plenty more where that came from. A shuttle arrived an hour later, and Captain Davis stepped through the airlock with two of his officers. The human commander was older than Rensa expected, gray streaking his dark hair, lines around his eyes that spoke of too many years making impossible decisions. He carried himself with quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew it was there. Commander Rensa, Davis extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. Rensa took it carefully, felt the strength in his grip and the deliberate gentleness he used to avoid hurting her. I wanted to see the damage personally, assess what you need for long-term repairs. They walked through the damaged sections together, Davis asking technical questions and listening to the answers with genuine interest. His engineering officer, Lieutenant Walsh, took notes and made suggestions about repair priorities, pointing out structural weaknesses that the station crew had missed in their emergency assessments. Your reactor core is stable, but you pushed it way past safety limits during the attack, Walsh said, her accent carrying musical tones from somewhere in Earth's southern hemisphere. We can help you. Recalibrate, but you'll want to replace the primary containment field generators within the next month. I can forward you the specs for compatible parts. They ended up in the command center. Rensa offered Davis a seat and waited while he reviewed the damage reports on her personal console. The captain was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he looked up and met her eyes. Commander, I need to ask you something, Davis said quietly. Why did you stay at your post when you ordered the evacuation? You knew the command center was the most exposed position on the station. Rensa considered the question, found herself answering with more honesty than she intended. My crew deserved to see their commander standing with them until the end. Running to safety while they faced death seemed wrong, somehow. Davis nodded slowly, something like approval in his weathered face. That's good leadership, the kind that matters when everything goes to hell. He paused, then continued in a gentler tone. But you're no good to your crew dead. Sometimes the brave thing is accepting you can't save everyone, including yourself. Your ship traveled 3 systems in the time it should have taken to cross 1, Rensa said, changing the subject because she didn't want to think about how close they had come to testing her courage in those final moments. Your engines must have been pushed to catastrophic failure levels. You risked your entire crew for strangers. Davis smiled, a tired expression that held old sadness and stubborn hope in equal measure. "We took a vote," he said simply. "Everyone from the bridge crew to the junior mechanics. Unanimous decision to burn the engines hot and get here fast. That's just how we do things, Commander." "Why?" Rensa asked, the question that had been building since the moment the Relentless tore through space itself. "Why risk everything for people you don't know?" The human captain stood, prepared to return to his ship. He looked at Rensa with eyes that had seen too much death and chosen to fight it anyway. "Because someone needed help and we could provide it," he said. "What other reason do we need?" The repair work took 3 days. Human engineers working alongside station personnel in shifts that seemed to ignore normal sleep requirements. Rensa watched Lieutenant Walsh jury-rig a solution to the damaged gravitational stabilizers using parts that shouldn't have been compatible and somehow making it work anyway. The human approach to engineering seemed to involve equal parts advanced mathematics and stubborn refusal to accept that things were impossible. "The tolerances are wrong," Dr. Feln protested, his geological training making him uncomfortable with Walsh's creative approach. "The specifications say these components can't interface." Walsh grinned, elbow deep in the stabilizer housing. "Specifications are suggestions written by folks who never had to fix things in combat conditions. Trust me, this will hold. I've done worse with less." Young Vril found herself assigned to help Lieutenant Riley with fighter maintenance. The human pilot treated her borrowed spacecraft with a mixture of professional care and casual affection that bordered on religious devotion. She showed Vril how to check the attitude thrusters while explaining her previous deployment. "We were running escort for a colony ship near the Broken Stars," Riley said, her hands moving over the fighter's systems with practiced ease. "Pirates thought they could hit the civilians while we were refueling. Bad assumption on their part." "Did you fight them?" Vril asked, her natural curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "Didn't have to," Riley laughed. "We launched with half-loaded weapons and engines still spooling up from cold start. Pirates took one look at how stupid we were being and decided we must have backup they couldn't see. They ran before we got in firing range." "But what if they hadn't run?" Riley's expression became serious, the playful pilot replaced by the combat veteran. "Then we would have fought anyway, because those colonists had families and dreams and they deserved protection. That's the job. Sometimes you do dangerous things because they need doing." On the second day, Captain Davis ordered his Marines to begin extracting survivors from the disabled Kroll warships. Rensa stood in the command center and watched the operation with growing disbelief as human boarding teams moved through the raider vessels, securing prisoners and providing medical treatment to injured enemies. "They're giving them medical care," Bren said, his voice climbing with incomprehension. "Commander, those are the same raiders who tried to kill us. Why are the humans helping them?" Brooks overheard the question from her position near the tactical console. She looked up from the security feed she was monitoring. "Because they surrendered," she said flatly. "That makes them prisoners, not targets. We have rules about how to treat prisoners." "But they're murderers," Rensa protested, her 3 hearts racing with anger at the thought of showing mercy to those who would have shown none. "They've destroyed stations across 12 systems, killed thousands. You should execute them." The sergeant's expression hardened, her scarred face becoming stern. "We don't murder helpless people, Commander. That's what separates us from them. The moment we start killing prisoners is the moment we become the same as the raiders, and that's a line we don't cross." Davis arrived in the command center as the last of the Kroll prisoners were being transferred to the Relentless brig. He listened to Rensa's objections with patient attention, his weathered face showing understanding but no agreement. "I know this seems wrong to you," Davis said when she finished. "Your people have different traditions, different rules of war. I respect that." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But humanity learned some hard lessons about what happens when you decide certain enemies don't deserve basic dignity." "What lessons?" Rensa demanded, still angry, still unable to understand why the humans refused to do what was tactically sound. Davis sat down heavily, suddenly looking every year of his age. "We nearly destroyed ourselves 6 times before we made it to the stars," he said quietly. "Wars that killed billions, weapons that poisoned entire continents. We did terrible things to each other because we decided our enemies weren't really people. They were just obstacles to be removed." He gestured toward the view screen showing the Kroll prisoners being processed. "Every one of those raiders is someone's son or daughter. They made terrible choices, committed horrific crimes. They'll face justice for that. But they're still sentient beings who deserve the chance to be better than their worst decisions." "What if they don't want to be better?" Bren asked, his earlier fear replaced by genuine curiosity. "What if they remain dangerous?" "Then they stay locked up," Brooks interjected. "We're not naive about this, Commander. We know some people can't be redeemed, but we give them the chance anyway, because the alternative is becoming the kind of people who kill without mercy." Corporal Hayes, the medic, arrived from the brig with a report on the prisoners' conditions. She spoke to Davis with the easy familiarity of a crew that had served together for years. 17 survivors, Captain, 12 with injuries ranging from minor to serious. One needs immediate surgery or he won't make it another 6 hours. "Then get him to surgery," Davis ordered without hesitation. "Use whatever resources you need." "Sir," Hayes said, her expression troubled. "That's the Kroll commander, the one who ordered the attack on this station, the one who laughed when Commander Rensa tried to negotiate. He's responsible for everything that happened here." Davis met her eyes steadily. "I know who he is, Corporal. Save his life anyway, that's an order." Hayes saluted and left. Rensa watched the human captain and tried to understand the philosophy that could produce such contradictions. Warriors fierce enough to destroy a fleet, but compassionate enough to save their enemy's life. "You're very strange," she said finally, not sure if she meant it as criticism or compliment. Davis smiled tiredly. "We get that a lot, Commander. Our rules don't make sense to most species. They barely make sense to us sometimes." He stood, prepared to return to his ship. "But there are rules, and we follow them even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's when they matter most." Lieutenant Walsh finished her work on the stabilizers and declared them functional for another decade if properly maintained. She left detailed maintenance logs and teaching materials, knowledge freely shared without expectation of payment. Jackson organized the remaining human rations into care packages for the station crew, each one containing handwritten notes of encouragement. Riley gave Vril a patch from her fighter squadron. The young researcher accepted it with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the casual generosity. "I can't take this," she protested. "It must mean something important to you." The pilot smiled. "It does. That's why I want you to have it. You're part of the family now. You survived something terrible and came out the other side. That earns respect in my book." On the 3rd day, repairs complete and prisoners secured, the Relentless prepared to depart. The station crew gathered in the docking bay to say farewell. The humans seemed almost embarrassed by the formal ceremony, preferring casual goodbyes and promises to visit if they passed through the sector. Again, Brooks shook hands with everyone, her grip careful and her smile genuine. "You folks did good work. Keep practicing those repair techniques Walsh showed you. And if you ever need anything, you've got our direct comm codes. Don't hesitate to call." Captain Davis stood with Rensa near the airlock, the two commanders sharing a moment of mutual respect earned through crisis. "Commander," he said, "you asked me why we do this, why we risk everything for strangers." He gestured toward his crew, toward the repaired station, toward the whole impossible situation. "The answer is simple. We remember what it's like to need help and find none. We remember being alone in the dark, waiting for rescue that never came. We swore we would never let that happen to anyone else if we had the power to prevent it." "And if you can't prevent it?" Rensa asked, remembering the haunted look in his eyes when they first spoke. "If you arrive too late?" Davis's expression darkened, old grief surfacing briefly before he pushed it back down. "Then we live with that failure and we try harder next time." he said softly. "We're not perfect. Commander, we don't save everyone, but we promise to try, and we keep that promise no matter what it costs." The humans departed with minimal ceremony, the Relentless pulling away from the station with smooth precision. Rensa stood in the command center and watched the dreadnought maneuver into departure position, its scarred hull bearing witness to countless battles fought and somehow won. "They're different from anyone else in the galaxy," Bren observed, his scales reflecting the blue light from the tactical display. "I'm not sure if that's reassuring or terrifying." Rensa thought about warriors who fought with overwhelming force but spared defeated enemies, about engineers who gave away knowledge freely, about a captain who ordered his crew to save the life of someone who tried to murder them all. "Both," she said finally. "They're both." 6 months passed before Rensa saw another human vessel. The sector had settled into nervous peace after news of the relentless engagement spread through criminal networks. Pirates and raiders gave research station Helix 7 a wide berth. Apparently word traveled fast when humanity decided to protect something. The station itself flourished in ways Rensa had not anticipated. Dr. Feln published 3 papers on his geological research, finally able to focus on science instead of survival. Young Vril wore Riley's squadron patch on her uniform every day, the small piece of fabric becoming something like a talisman. Bren had stopped jumping at shadows, and his scales maintained their normal, healthy color. But the most significant change was in how other species viewed the station. Research vessels from a dozen civilizations requested permission to dock. Scientists eager to work at the facility that had earned human protection. Applications for staff positions tripled. The quiet research outpost became a hub of galactic cooperation simply because everyone knew the humans would come if called. Rensa stood in the command center reviewing supply requests when the proximity alarms chimed. Her 3 hearts seized for a moment before tactical confirmed it was a friendly contact. A human destroyer on standard patrol, updating its navigation data and checking in on the station. The destroyer captain, a young woman named Rodriguez, accepted Rensa's invitation to dock for a brief visit. She brought fresh supplies and news from the broader galaxy. Apparently, the Relentless had become something of a legend. Stories about Captain Davis and his crew spreading through both military and civilian channels. "They're still out there," Rodriguez said over tea in Rensa's office. "Still answering distress calls, still showing up when everyone else says it's impossible," she smiled. "Captain Davis probably doesn't realize he's inspiring half the junior officers in the fleet, but he is. We all want to be like him when we grow up." "And the prisoners?" Rensa asked, curiosity overcoming her lingering discomfort with human mercy. "What happened to the Kroll raiders?" Rodriguez's expression became serious. 14 of them accepted plea agreements, providing testimony against their organization in exchange for reduced sentences. "They're serving time, but they'll get out eventually, maybe become better people." She paused. 2 refused any cooperation, maximum security prison, life sentences, and 1, the commander, he was different. "Different how?" "He started talking," Rodriguez explained. "Told us about the Kroll operation, supply routes, command structure, safe houses across 6 systems, information that let us shut down 3 other raider cells before they could attack anyone." She met Rensa's eyes. "He said he kept thinking about why the humans saved his life, couldn't reconcile it with everything he believed about power and survival. Eventually it broke something in him, the certainty that might makes right." Rensa absorbed this, trying to understand a philosophy that could transform enemies through simple decency. "So your mercy was strategic?" "No," Rodriguez said firmly. "Our mercy was moral, the strategic benefits were just a bonus. We saved him because it was right, not because we thought he might be useful." The young captain departed after a few hours, leaving behind care packages and updated security protocols. Rensa watched the destroyer accelerate away and felt grateful that humanity had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors. A species with their military capacity could have dominated half the galaxy. Instead, they spent their time rescuing research stations and giving prisoners second chances. 3 weeks later, proximity alarms sounded again, this time announcing multiple hostile contacts. 6 ships, configuration matching known pirate vessels. Rensa felt old fear rising before training took over. She ordered shields raised and weapons charged. Their defensive capabilities were still minimal, but they would fight. Then Tactical confirmed something interesting. The pirate vessels were broadcasting surrender codes before even entering weapons range, requesting permission to be taken into custody, claiming they wanted no trouble with a human-protected station. Bren stared at his console, scales rippling with confused amusement. "Commander, they're running away from us. We didn't even fire a warning shot." Rensa contacted the lead pirate vessel, a battered freighter with obvious weapon modifications. The captain appeared on screen, a scarred veteran who looked like he had survived too many fights. His expression was carefully neutral, almost respectful. "Research Station Helix 7, he said, his translator rendering his words in formal tones. "We were not aware this facility was under Terran protection. We will alter our course immediately. No hostile intent. Requesting you do not contact the human patrol." "You're fleeing because you think the humans will come," Rensa said, understanding dawning. "You believe they'll answer if we call." The pirate captain's expression became bitter. "We know they'll come. Captain Davis doesn't just protect stations, he hunts those who threaten them. 3 of our sister ships learned that lesson the hard way." He paused. "We steal cargo, not lives. We're not interested in making enemies of people who will chase us across the galaxy for revenge." The pirate vessels departed at maximum acceleration, clearly eager to put distance between themselves and potential human intervention. Rensa sat in her command chair and processed what had just happened. They had been saved by simple reputation. The mere possibility of human response was enough to deter aggression. Vril approached hesitantly, holding a data pad with the updated security logs. "Commander, do you think Captain Davis knows what he started, that his actions 6 months ago are still protecting us?" Rensa thought about the tired captain with his gray hair and sad eyes, the warrior who fought because people needed protection and no other reason. "I think he knows," she said quietly. "And I think he's doing the same thing somewhere else right now, saving people who thought they were going to die, giving them a future they didn't expect to have." She pulled up the secure channel Davis had provided, the direct line to Terran Navy operations. They hadn't needed to use it yet. The threat of its existence was apparently enough. But knowing it was there, knowing that help would come if they called, that changed everything. "They made us a promise," Rensa said, more to herself than to Vril. "They promised we were under their protection, and they meant it." She looked at the young researcher, at the squadron patch that meant so much. "The humans are different from everyone else in the galaxy. Vril, they keep their promises even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, and they're teaching the rest of us what that kind of integrity looks like." That night, Rensa stood in the observation deck and watched the stars, the same view she had seen the day they were attacked, when death seemed certain and hope was impossible. She thought about the human warship that howled out of the void, the warriors who fought with fury but showed mercy, the captain who risked everything for strangers. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Relentless was patrolling, answering distress calls, standing between the helpless and those who would harm them. Captain Davis and his crew were keeping their promise, paying the cost of their principles in fuel and ammunition and lives risked. And across the galaxy, on research stations and colony worlds and anywhere humans had offered protection, people slept more soundly knowing that if the worst happened, if danger came calling in the night, there would be an answer. Help would come howling out of the void, scarred and determined and absolutely unwilling to let evil win. Rensa touched the screen, watching distant stars, thinking about hope and courage and the strange humans who had given both freely. "Thank you," she whispered to the darkness, knowing Davis couldn't hear but needing to say it anyway. "Thank you for coming when we needed you." The stars offered no reply, but somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a human warship maintained its patrol, weapons ready, engines hot, waiting for the next call. Waiting to prove once again that no one had to face the darkness alone.